Okay, it's 5:30. I'd like to call to order the Beecher Board of Education Policy Committee meeting. It's Monday, December 11th. We are going to be discussing Press Policy 113. Any public comments? And then, so did all of you get a chance to review the press policy changes and the footnotes? Do you have any questions about anything?
I have provided you 3 updated documents. One of them, if I may, Ms. Mazurk, I'm sorry to step in. First of all,
No.
sorry for no internet, folks, if you're watching this tomorrow. There are 3 of them that I wanted to either update or clean up. The first one is the top one, 2220. It provides alternate avenues for people to attend remotely. You guys have a policy in place where it is an in-person only. So when Press Plus, I looked this up, when Press Plus submitted that to us, it was under the assumption as if you were to go back, because there is a subcategory that says if a quorum does not exist. So what I did is I provided you an actual, what your policy would look like. It actually doesn't take effect at all because you guys don't allow a remote option at this time. There's not a declaration of a public emergency, so therefore there's not a remote possibility for you guys to attend meetings. So when we do a first reading, that is the first reading you'll do. It will not be the inclusion of a remote option. Unless you want to go back to having a remote option, which is then designated by the president, vice president, and then de facto me if neither one are present.
And then does it have something to do, I thought that I read somewhere, like, in the case of like a childcare emergency?
Right, so if the district went from to a remote option where there's still a quorum present, so there's 4 of you guys present in person, but the policy still allowed for a remote option, which doesn't exist now. Yeah, what would have happened was there's now a 4th option, which is if there's a child care emergency existing for that board member, they could then be remote. That would be one of the.
And that would make the quorum. It would be remote, but then that would make the quorum.
The quorum in person has to exist, and then the other one
okay.
would be remote. Yeah,
That's
right.
where I was a little bit confused.
So as I read it on the Press Plus that was sent to us, it had the remote option, and I was like, hold the phone, when did we do this? But I guess what they issued us was incorrect. So we have no remote option currently for board members.
Correct. So if you look at the actual side document, not the packet, but there's an actual side document that has that whole section just omitted altogether. If at some point in time a national emergency, or I'm sorry, a state of emergency is declared again, then you would enact the quorum and proximity section of it. The second one I provided you as a secondary one. Ms. Mazurk, would you like me to kind of go through it all or just kind of answer just general concerns that came across my desk or through board members?
We can go over concerns unless, do we feel it's necessary for the recording to read the whole thing?
No, because it's available for the public. And this would still be first read, so once the first reading is out there, it's still available to the public. And again, most of them, as I've noted, are all updated footnotes. If something comes through legal. But the second one that I mentioned was policy 6230. You guys have an extra copy on there. Now, what they've done is they've amended the old policy, which was policy 7, says that the district adopts the ALA, the American Literature Association stuff, which was in policy prior. Well, the new aspect of that is they move 7 to 4. So if you were looking at your board packet, one that I gave you, that looked like, oh, I took it out. Okay, I took it out. It would have had 7 crossed out, and 4 would have had a new blue line. So this is completely up to you, ladies, and Larry, if he was here. When I sent this off to Mr. Gleason, who is the attorney that represents the board, and I asked, hey, this is one of those that's kind of quasi-controversial. Because what happens is if you adopt this policy, as they wrote it through IASB, you have done basically a carte blanche. Librarian can choose anything that they want to put in the library. Board doesn't have the autonomy to negate anything, and you can never, ever, ever prohibit anything in your libraries. Now, I'm not saying you are or not wanting to prohibit things in your library, but it does not give you guys the discretion to have that conversation or have that decision. It's taken out of your hands, and it's given that full autonomy to the librarian. So, Mr. Gleason has suggested that you have a conversation whether or not we get $700 in a library grant. It's used at the high school, and she buys, this year she bought some, I forget what books she bought at this, Mr. Meyer. But she just kind of buys a selection of 800 books, some DVDs, things like that. $700 at the end of the day is not a huge sum of money, especially if it takes authority from the Board of Education. Some people see this as a anti-pro political statement. It is not meant to be that at all. The bigger aspect is the superintendent. I don't like the fact that it takes the authority from the governing body and gives it to one individual. I never, ever, ever think that our 3 wonderful librarians would do anything that would be questionable or that would kind of go against what, you know, would be great and what, like, out there. I don't know how to say this gently, but I don't want to take that authority from you. So it's kind of up to you, ladies. If you want to continue moving down the path we are, and allow the librarians and the principals to kind of have that autonomy to understand what should and shouldn't be in libraries. We shouldn't have elementary books that have certain things in them. Then you can accept it. Or if you want to make sure that if there are concerns, the community can bring those concerns to you, and there's a possibility that books could be removed in the future, then you can't accept it. But you also lose out on that $700 grant.
So if we accepted it, can parents, so they have the uniform grievance, like the right to submit that uniform grievance if there is something, so would we have to do away with that opportunity as well if they wanted to bring, you know, a concerning book to us?
So as I understand is once you accept it, there is nothing that, you can never prohibit anything in your library from either side. I'm not.
And if we don't accept that condition, then we lose the $700?
You can't apply for the grant because you have not accepted the ALA stipulation.
That's a bummer.
So again, I apologize. Again, this is one of the things that the world tries to make schools about politics, and I apologize for that, ladies. Schools around us are approving it. They don't have a problem with it because they kind of understand their community and things, you know, they'll kind of cross that bridge when it comes up.
If it gets approved, that doesn't say you can't change it and take it off at a later date and time, correct?
Correct. So if next year at this time, when you guys do an updated policy, the grant is yearly, so I think it'd probably be a bad idea to get the grant and then 2 weeks later be like, aha, I got you. But, you know, we do the grants in August, September, those times, and then it's one of the questions that is asked, have you accepted the ALA standards? And this year we said yes because it was number 7 there. Next year we can say yes, and if something comes up between now and then in November, my guess is once that happens, they do, with any grant, ask you to submit expenditure reports. There's probably a good chance that that expenditure report would include some kind of stipulation of, hey, do you still have these standards accepted?
So then it gives that the librarian and administration, or just the
So the
librarian?
designee, so technically speaking, our media people are not actual librarians, so you give that autonomy, I guess, to me and to the principals. So like Ms. Plentz, who does a great job, before she buys anything, she gets to Mr. Meyer, says, hey, here are the things that kids have been requesting, and he looks over. Most of the time it's, you know, history or things that they need for research, things like that. Same with, well, Ms. Berger has like kids' books and things like that. But this grant only really applies to the high school. They're the only ones that get it. And I can't tell you, we're buying a lot of books these days. Everything being online and.
I mean, I know it's controversial, but I don't know that it's ever been anything that anyone has expressed concern from the community to our school for, that they've been concerned without books. I mean,
I just trust the professional judgment of the educators of what the kids should be reading and can be reading. their education and whatever they need.
And I think that if it comes up as a question, as to their question books, what Ms. Belt said, that we could always update and change it in the future if it becomes an issue. I'd still like to try to hang on to that $700.
I mean, I'm assuming there's like a adoption policy prior to,
For a book,
yeah, like.
this is what I
Yeah.
said, so,
Comparable.
Yeah, Vicky will look at what kids have been requested, send it to Mr. Meyer, and he
So
reviews it.
2-3 sets of eyes before anything is purchased.
Because it's not saying we have to have certain books.
It should say that whoever
Yeah.
purchased them.
Yeah, because that I think would be a bigger issue if it was saying you have to have these books in your library. That might be a bigger issue than just,
So what does the process look like now for them buying books? Is it just
So,
who approves the books that are purchased?
it's so your designee is the principal, so if there's books to be bought, if it's the grant money, or any money at all, I guess, it's provided to the principals, they look at the list. And I'll be honest, most of them, I didn't know when I was a principal, trusted the judgment of the media center. Even, Vicky's brought the psychologist teacher.
Dr. Mike just
Yes,
today. Was very
he's a
nice.
wonderful man. He wrote a book. It's he's a pastor. It's a religious book. So she actually came to me. She was like, "Hey, he donated this to the library. It's very religious." And she goes, "Separate, church and state." I said, "Talk to his class. Say, hey, we have his book. If somebody wants to look at it, they understand what he is. But don't put it on that shelf right there." So even something as what I would believe is uncontroversial is religion, but I understand it can be. Vicky's come down to my office and said, "Hey, this was donated to us by one of the instructors. I want to make it available to at least the students. Are you all right with it?" So I said, "Yeah." I mean, if somebody comes up and asks you specifically about it, the rationale is it's your instructor. I mean, if you want to know what he's about, I'm sure he's talked about it before.
Yeah.
I definitely don't discredit the judgment of the librarians either. However, we did give the community this option to be able to submit a grievance if there was something they didn't like. And by doing this, that takes that option away from the community, and I'm not comfortable with that.
I agree. I feel like we need to keep some like checks and balances in place. I don't think anything inappropriate would get through, but I think taking away the checks and balance would, I'm not comfortable with that.
and we've never had anyone fill out a grievance on a
We've
book,
had it.
correct?
It's always the first time, but no, as
Yeah,
of
yeah.
December
I'm just waiting to
11th,
say,
the answer
that's,
is no.
even though it's always been there, it's never happened.
So if we accept this and something comes in that's questioned by the community,
Mhm.
we cannot remove it.
You cannot have a policy that prohibits or bans a book.
Can we ask that it be removed regardless?
Once you would have to revisit your policy,
Okay.
because you have theoretically banned a particular book, which is against your policy.
And that would be a whole thing, I'm sure, to reverse a policy that's already in place.
It'd take 2 months. You would have to
Yeah,
have
it's
a
the
first
same
reading
thing.
and then a second
Yeah,
reading. Yeah.
it's- yeah.
Like anything that you do today is not in policy until
It has to get
January.
approved twice, so even
Yep.
if we were to say first reading, we approve it, second reading, we change our mind, it doesn't get approved.
So yeah, correct. You could do a first reading where you accept it today. You could go back to the public and they could say, hey,
Get
you know what?
feedback and,
Yeah, Ms. Bell, I don't agree with this. You probably should look at this again. And then when you go for a second reading, you could say, no, I want to
Yeah.
pull out this one. Or the other way around. You could say, no, I want to put that back in.
Okay.
I mean, people can always come and give a public comment,
100%.
expressing their ideas regardless. I just think you open up a Pandora's box of people starting to question everything, and then it becomes people's personal opinions versus what could be a curriculum. You know what I mean? Like, there could be a book that parent just doesn't like because they don't want their kid reading Catcher in the Rye as a freshman, which should be a conversation that's different than,
Yeah.
I don't know. I honestly don't think most people are even gonna know what's in most of the books of the libraries. A lot
And the
of
thing
kids are
is,
reading
even-
things online.
yeah.
I mean, they're getting a lot of things on Kindles and online. And most people are having those conversations with their kids and they can see what they're reading online anyway.
Or honestly, if the kid wants to read a book and we don't have it, they're gonna go to the local library.
Yeah.
I mean, I see both sides of it. I just hate taking away the money from them to
Correct.
be able to get the books they want here in school. Because they're not getting the grant, like you said, the school is not gonna spend that part of their budget on books knowing that they have things online, that they can go to the local library.
And if it's what they're already reading and the kids are requesting, I'm just thinking like they like graphic novels, you're buying more graphic
I
novels.
know.
They're going through the staff, you trust your staff, then it's,
I'm on the fence too, but I'm leaning more towards like, you know, trusting like the educators
Yeah.
and the librarians. Like I get the whole other side of it, but those are the ones who really know what's in there, and what the
Correct.
reasoning
Yes.
behind it. Where like I said, I feel like, yeah, but I do understand both sides of it obviously too, but
they know what's in each book. They probably have read most of these books to have a decent grasp of what they are purchasing based on reviews or, you know, like our librarians, like they've read most of those things that they're ordering.
Well, I mean, I think that, I agree wholeheartedly with, I don't want that taken away from us and in turn representing the community. But we haven't had any complaints, we haven't had any issues so far. It does ultimately need to be approved by staff that we do trust, and $700 is $700, and we can change it. If our, if we are hearing from our community, hey, there's things that are questionable, but the fact that we haven't, just, I'm leaning towards allowing this with the option of being able to change it in the future if it becomes an
People
issue.
can still bring concerns. They may not do a universal grievance. They can still email or call and
Right, and if it is a
Express
concern
things
from
that
the
they want to
community,
look at.
then I definitely think that we should look into it, because I would like to be able to represent the community with, you know, but the fact that we haven't had anyone complaining about any of the books in our library thus far, you know, I'd still like to capture, you know, be able to give that grant to our students. So my recommendation to the board would be to have legal write in 7, and what, take out 4 and write in 7?
So what the original Press Plus stated.
Oh,
To
okay.
accept the ALA.
All right.
So I just want, so before we move on from anything, because we're gonna have a first reading tonight, I wanna make sure that the consensus is one way or another on this one, because when you vote for it, this, we're gonna make the motion of accept Press Plus 6230 as provided by IASB Press Plus, which is accepting the ALA. I just don't want, we can't say as presented, because what I presented you
It's
is a
not.
little bit different than, I just want to make sure that the motion is correct.
So if 4 of us are for it and 2 are on the fence, then that's still motioning to the board to
Well,
approve it.
technically, your policy committee, so it would be what the 3 of you recommend to be to the board.
Okay, so
I mean, we can always have a discussion and vote, yeah, we can always have a discussion and vote full board, like, the same discussion we're having here, we can have again when it comes up. But that kind of just lets us know that you've had a pre-conversation and you guys have decided this is kind of where we're leaning. Larry can come and ask more questions or vice versa, you know, kind of things, but as the policy committee, you guys are kind of supposed to take, like, what do you guys see since you do it? It's just the fact that we're here, because probably it's a full board meeting.
Right.
So
You
Ms.
know, it's a
Mizu-
little bit confusing.
Yeah.
But you're also right, if
Yeah.
4 people who are sitting here right now are gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna go with that, you're right, that's a
Yeah.
that's a
We're presenting
majority.
that way.
Yeah, fine. But you're also right, two are yes, one's on the fence in the policy committee.
I just feel like I know that this is kind of a newer topic, and unfortunately, like you said, it's unfortunate that things are political, but they are.
Yeah.
And, you know, in recent times where, you know, they are questioning specific books, I feel like if we do this and we take this out of the community's hand, like I said, they can't do a grievance, we have to go through a whole process, and some of the particular books that maybe haven't made it on the shelf yet, potentially could. I feel like that would be a big upset to the community, and I'm not comfortable with it, so.
You have to go on the fact that if you look, legal's recommended to not accept it. I mean, so that kind of needs to be taken in to consideration also, because they are our legal counsel. So I think that also needs to be taken into not just our personal opinions or what we think the community feels. They are our legal representation for a reason.
And I mean, at the end of the day, like you said, there are other outlets. So if they are going to find that particular book at school, but they want to be able to read that book, there are other outlets and other sources where they could read that book. For first read, I think that we are motioning to accept it.
Accept the IASB
That's
recommended.
what it's kind of sounding like, yeah.
So that'll be the motion, so it won't be as presented, so Ms. Belt, when you read that, if you want to take a glance over here, I'll try to remember that as well. And then the other one that I gave you, and I provided you, was a update to the it's specific to special ed non-resident special ed students, but I double checked with Mr. Gleason just to make sure that we're not doing something that we don't already provide. We don't allow we allow McKinney-Vento, things like that, but non-residents to then send their students here. So what I provided you is a clean version because I crossed out both sections. One of the two has to be accepted because the one actually has the McKinney-Vento, the things like that. So I've given you a nice clean version of what that policy looks like, and not approving the additional resources of allowing non-resident students outside those specific reasons to be students here. And those specific reasons are legal reasons. So I wanted to give you guys a nice clean version of that, because my handwriting is terrible. Other than that, 7270 is the Narcan. Will County provides those for free. So we have those in buildings. We're getting staff trained within the next month on how to use those effectively. Right now, the nurses have not jumped on board the O2 because there's a lot of question marks about, the containers, how we can make sure that they're up to date, things like that. So I'll be honest with you, until my nurses are comfortable saying yes, I'll have that. I can't recommend that we accept the O2 part of it. Again, it's optional. So those are the other two that I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of.
I agree with that. I feel like they should be comfortable with that process and we should know a little bit more about it.
Any others?
I had concerns about 716, accessorizing, associated with culture, ethnicity, or religious identity, which I'm not opposed to, but I'm also nervous that it can get to a point
Where it's a lot.
where it's an extreme. If we allow one religious entity, are we going to allow another religious entity that may cause controversy or maybe offensive? I don't.
We did have.
It's a law, but I mean, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the only question we had, like, with graduation, the high schoolers got explicit instructions and the junior high was given nothing. So maybe if there was guidelines. No, the thing is, so kids were because they don't have
Right.
hats.
Right.
So maybe if, like, there's some kind of guidelines to the kids to say, like, hey, you're allowed to do X.
Or,
But-
yeah, is that allowed or is it just whatever
Can we
they
give them
So,
parameters?
that-
Like, it's a fine
again,
line.
there's a lot of gray areas on
Yeah.
this one. Mr. Meyer, it really opened up over the last couple of years that just keep it to the hat. You can do
Yeah.
anything you want in the hat portion of it.
Yeah.
But for the junior high, it's a little different, because I remember last year we had,
Right.
And nobody kind of knew they could do it, nobody knew they couldn't do it.
because again,
So,
I remember there was a
yeah.
couple that were upset, they're like, oh, we're allowed to do that. I would have done it for, and I was like, sorry, I
So
was
what
not
I
aware.
can work, what I'll do is I'll reach out to Mr., again, I truly believe of all the things that, on the policy,
Yeah.
this is the one, not through Beecher,
Yeah.
this is one that's gonna create some kind of lawsuit coming down the pipeline, because, again, either you're prohibiting my expression, or you're offending my expression by allowing that to happen.
And is this something we need to, is it written in the policy or whatever that we need to notify that it is a law and allowed, like, no?
I mean, you-
Okay, well, I didn't know like what our area would be like, do we have to make sure that class knows that this is allowed, you know? Or it's
And
just,
can we put a restriction on what's allowable?
And that's what I want to
Yeah,
work
like
with Bill on,
parameters,
to
guidelines.
keep it to a hat or keep it to.
Like a stole or
Yeah.
something, like
Yeah.
one something that is, like, can we put in some specific guidelines? Because the next thing you know, like, I don't know, I'm just afraid of you give an inch and you take a mile or something that is, then it turns in from this uniformity of having your something to just it going a little bit haywire and then there's no standard.
And I see it maybe not being an issue this year, but once people realize.
yeah.
Yeah. If you give a mouse a cookie.
Yes, that's when I think the issue's gonna come. Because, maybe, I mean, hopefully not, I mean, not, but.
And like I said, Mike's had has had a really good conversation with people about, you know, your hats and things like that. I've talked to Mr. Stein and Dr. Palin, kind of see where they're at with this, and they're kind of the same where we are. We're gonna see what happens. We're gonna have those honest conversations with kids and families. There's always that worry, but.
Well, maybe if we could even, like I said, they can express it by, yes, their hat or a simple stole, or like if we can set some guidelines to it, maybe that would be better as well.
Yep.
Some parameters for it.
Yes.
So we all know, hey, I can do this, or no, I
That,
can't.
I think that was my only other one.
All right.
Was there any other concerns with any of the footnotes or any changes? Is there any public comment afterwards?
I don't know that they're here for public.
No.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The trees of the United States appreciate you not asking me to print 7 versions of this. So,
And I maybe for future discussion, because I know we want to move on, but, so 460 moved the threshold for what needs to go for an RFP to 25 to 35. I know it was asked in the past that we bump up our, what is approved by the board, so maybe if that's being moved up, maybe we.
Not approved to the board, what Dr. Cahan, his limit for approval.
Right.
that needs to be.
Yes, so maybe we can
Because
think
with
about
inflation
that.
now, it makes it even harder on him.
So maybe we can think about that and revisit that in that discussion in the future. If it's a trend, because I see it's getting harder and harder. That's just more that we have to, more on our plates.
Agreed. I was looking at that too, like, oh, okay, so we kind of need to bump that up a little bit.
So, that's the only, so if we, I don't know, discuss that maybe for next year?
sure.
Any,
Just
I don't know, can you
long as-
remind us to discuss it next year?
Well, there's gonna be other press
Yeah.
updates that come
Okay.
down the pipe, so
All right,
probably be a good idea not to address it today, but
yeah, nope.
already approved.
yeah.
Is Joe here? Oh, Joe Duncan?
Did I come
All right.
after that?
Mr. Meyer, could you do me a favor and turn off the camera? Oh, you need to adjourn.
So, if there's no further comments, I make a motion to adjourn the policy committee meeting.
So moved. Oh, or second.
All in favor?
Whatever you want to do, Katie.
Other side, Dr. Kwasny. It's gonna be a red rectangular button.